loosely derived from chapter 5 in your textbook, but it was sort of a little too light and fluffy, so we added in some details that ought to have been there all along. All right, so the things I want you to know. You're going to have to know what things do photosynthesis, why photosynthesis is important to ecosystems. Short answer is the bottom of the food chain. List the types of energy, kinetic and potential, and examples of each. How does photosynthesis do the conversion of sunlight into energy stored in energy-filled molecules? And I want you to just write down G3P next to there. You'll need that. All right, so we're going to start with things that you might hear the physics nerds upstairs talking about. Would you agree that energy, capacity to do work in cells, when we talk about capacity to do work, we mean making molecules or moving stuff in and out of the cell. That's work. All right. Without a constant source of energy, life would stop. Here we have a cell, and the cell's taking in energy, and the cell's taking these monomers, and putting together the polymers. The cell wastes some energy, it's heat and all. But the cell's happy, the cell's alive. Cut off the energy, no input of energy, the cell dies. That's what it is. Cells have to have energy coming in to survive. That's one of the reasons why we say viruses are not alive, because viruses can survive without having energy input. Yeah. All right, so always know that we always have new energy being added to the system. All right, types of energy. Yes, yes?
Saying, okay, so viruses don't require energy?
That's right, not technically alive. All right, so kinetic energy, energy of motion or movement. Now, there are two ways that this matters in the cell. The big one that I put in red, what's that mean? Yeah, you got to know it. Okay, so photons of light are moving, right? You have little photons of light moving. That's why we say light is a form of kinetic energy. Electricity, we say, is a form of kinetic energy. You're like, huh? Well, it's moving electrons. That's what electricity is. You know what a current is. Goodness knows we don't understand why the physicists assume that it's a plus current, a plus electrode where the negative electrons are coming from, but they can figure that out for themselves. Anyway, potential energy is the opposite. It's the energy that is stored in chemical bonds. Well, in our case, we're talking about chemical bonds. It's actually stored energy. If you have water behind a dam, the position of the water is potential energy, right? If you have chemical bonds arranged a certain way, that's energy. You break those bonds, you release energy. You open the sluice on the dam, you release that energy. Good? So position, potential energy. And you can use that to do work. All right. Hey, autotrophs don't create their energy, they convert it. So anything we're talking about, like an algae, like a plant, those are the two big ones that do photosynthesis. We know that there's some forms of bacteria, like cyanobacteria, that also do photosynthesis. They capture sunlight and they convert it into chemical energy. Chemical energy, I already said it, is a form of potential energy. Humans eat things to survive. That makes us heterotrophs, opposite of autotrophs. Autotrophs make their own food. Heterotrophs have to eat something to survive. Chemical energy, potential energy stored in biological molecules. You've heard that twice in the last 3 slides. We break these bonds, we release the energy. Anabolic and catabolic reactions. You've heard about these, right? In anabolic, we are adding atoms together. We're adding things together. So take these monomers, you add them together, make polymers. That's anabolic. Anabolic tends to require energy. Catabolic, the breaking of the bonds between the monomers, tends to release energy. Got to know both of those. Catabolic cuts, anabolic adds. Adding requires energy. Cutting releases energy. All right, so algae plants are getting energy from the sun. They trap these sort of molecules. The chapter in the book, if you like following along in the book, it goes on and on and on about biofuels. That's not my main thrust here. We will discuss it at the end. You'll have 1 or 2 questions about that on the test. But the main thing is going to be how does ATP work, the making of ATP work. So light energy, it's energy in the electromagnetic spectrum. It has different wavelengths. So different wavelengths have different energies. Good? Good? So light is made of photons. We already said that, moving photons. Different wavelengths, different amounts of energy. Up here, the reds, the oranges, the yellows, not as much energy. The longer wavelengths, to get deeper down underwater, those have more energy. That's why they can go deeper. Plants like this and plants like this. plants, I know this sounds weird, plants hate green. But plants are green. Do you know why plants are green? They're reflecting the only wavelength they don't use. They're reflecting that back to your eyes because it's useless to them. I don't know why it's useless, but they really have a thing against green. That green's a wavelength they don't use. They'll use the wimpy ones, the reds, the oranges, the yellows. They'll use the intensely powerful ones, the blues and the purples. The ones in the middle is like, nah, I don't want that. And so it bounces back to your eyeballs and, oh, plants are green. Oh, yeah, no, plants are anti-green. All right, moving on. So, photosynthesis, a closer look. Look at this picture from the book. And notice how blah it is. And then look at my version of it. It's so much better than you'll see in a few slides. I know it's a minor deal, but it actually took a lot of work to fix it. All right, anyway, so photosynthesis, closer look. We're going to talk about chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is a little pigment, a little colored molecule that is present in the chloroplast, in the green parts of the plant. It is the solar panel. It is the thing that absorbs the light energy. Good? Good? All right. So, photosynthesis, we're absorbing sun energy, or making chemical reactions to build complex molecules. You agree this is an anabolic reaction because we're building large things, right? What we're going to do, we're going to take in simple little things, sugars, carbon dioxide, so we're going to put together more complex things. So you take in a simple carbon dioxide, a little tiny single carbon, you hook them together and make complex things. Now the book says it's glucose. It's not, it's G3P. Write that down. I corrected it on some of the other pictures. It is G3P. Now, I'm being nitpicky, I'll be honest, because what it is, G3P is a 3-carbon molecule. And so the Calvin cycle makes G3P, Calvin cycle makes G3P again. You hook 2 of them together and you have a 6-carbon glucose. Basically, most books leave out one step. G3P, G3P, glucose. Most books just say, oh, the Calvin cycle makes glucose. No, it doesn't. That's all. Good? Easy enough? All right. So energy transformation is not efficient. Newton told us all about this, and he was right. Every time you transfer energy from one form to another, you lose a little bit of heat. You lose a little bit of energy. So there were heat loss. This is why you have to keep supplying energy. Remember I said you had to keep giving energy to the cell? The reason why is every time you do a transformation, you lose some of it. So that's why the cell has, where's my stupid, that's why the cell has the lost energy. Okay? We're taking energy and we lose a little bit. Why do we lose it? Because those transformations we're making are not efficient. All right. And so we always have to keep adding it in. Now this leads to an interesting question. Well, I'll spring down you guys in a minute. So something I want you to know, this is important. Well, 2 things that I want you to know on here that are both in red. Nutrients are cycling, energy is not. You agree energy from the sun comes in, it powers everything, but at every step we're losing some of it, so we have to keep putting more energy in. Energy passes right through the ecosystem, has to always be supplied. Nutrients, on the other hand, look at carbon. Oh, I'm carbon and carbon dioxide. I'm in the air. It's so lovely. And then guess what? The plant takes it in. And the plant uses it to make sugars. And then the sugars are part of the plant that are eaten by the animal. And then the animal has the carbon as part of it. Or the animal poops it out and the carbon is part of the feces. Or the animal breathes it out and it's part of the air. And the carbon goes around and around and around. It's like part of the grass and part of the trees and part of the air and part of the animal and part of the grass. It goes again and again and again. Carbon goes around, energy passes through. Good? So I want you to know that nutrient cycle, when we do ecology, we're going to talk about the carbon cycle and the phosphorus cycle and the nitrogen cycle and the water cycle. We'll go over all of that stuff. But I want you to know that the nutrient cycle, the energy passes through. The other thing I want you to know is that photosynthesis, the thing we're talking about in this PowerPoint, is only half of the story. The one we're talking about in the next PowerPoint is respiration. And they're opposite processes. Photosynthesis, we take water, we take carbon dioxide, and we use energy to hook them together to make sugars with a byproduct of oxygen. Everybody take a deep breath. Thank you, plants. Okay, that's where it comes from, all right? Now, The opposite process is cellular respiration. That's the next PowerPoint. There, we're breaking down the glucose, we're using oxygen to make it happen, and we release energy. Goes round and round and round. Now, most of the autotrophs do both of these things. Or I should say all of the ones I know of do both. This is a big deal. I'll do it here at this point. I should have done it, I probably should do it later, but this is where I was thinking of it. If energy transfers are inefficient, and plants are doing both of these, what's actually going on? Yeah, I'll just do it right there. I was going to go for a pretty picture. I can go for this pretty picture to illustrate it. No, I can't. Where is the picture? There it is. All right. You see the light energy comes in, and in the light reactions, the book calls them the photoreactions, but they're the light reactions. The light reactions make ATP. And then the ATP is used to power the Calvin cycle, which is going to take the carbon dioxide and make sugars. But what are the plants doing with these sugars? What are they doing? Well, some of them they use for things like making cellulose for cell walls, but a lot of them they give to their mitochondria that break the sugars down to make ATP. So we're taking light energy to make ATP, to make sugar, to break the sugar apart to make ATP? Why? Why? I mean, that's incredibly wasteful because we're losing energy at every single flipping step. Why would you do that? Because it beats dying. All right? Plants will not make it through the night. ATP has a very short lifespan. It'll last, say, 15 minutes, 20 minutes maybe in the wild. What happens if you depend on the light reactions and then there's sundown and there's no light? And in 15 minutes you run out of energy and you die. That's not a good option. So what the plants are doing is taking all the energy available and they're making sugar. And then at night they can take that sugar and their mitochondria can keep making ATP to keep them alive through the night. So they always have a supply of ATP to do whatever they need. Good? Now, I'm not saying that the mitochondria don't work during the day too. It's more like a diesel electric generator. The electric generator is always working. I should say the diesel's always working. In the same way, the mitochondria is always working, day or night. But the light reactions only work when there is light. Are we shocked by that? Okay, I'm not getting a lot of nod.
A little bit of shock.
Not at all shocked, Dominic?
I said a little bit of shock.
Oh, okay. Really? You're shocked at the late? Okay, fine. I'm gullible. All right, so we've been through that. This is what the book's drawing is. The same thing. You see photosynthesis, just like in the last one. You take in water, carbon dioxide, and energy from the sun, and you make oxygen and glucose. Thank you, plants. All right, cellular respiration, we do the opposite. We get the energy out, we breathe out the carbon dioxide, we breathe out water. Good, good, good. All right. Most producers, autotrophs, do both. That means that we've got the chloroplasts and the mitochondria. You have to know that plants have mitochondria. I'm so sick of people saying, oh, plants do photosynthesis. No, plants do it all. We, heterotrophs, we don't do photosynthesis. We only do things with our mitochondria because we don't have a chloroplast. We only consume. All right. The other thing I want you to know, and this is important, I want you to know that both paths use electron transport chains. For the longest time, biologists, when they were talking about respiration and mitochondria, they would talk about the electron transport chain. You know, there's glycolysis and there's Krebs and there's the electron transport chain. Well, the problem with calling something the electron transport chain is that people think that's the only one. In reality, there are two electron transport chains in photosynthesis, and there's one big honking one here. So when we get to cellular respiration, we're going to use a different name. It's a newer name. It's a trendier name. It's oxidative phosphorylation instead of the electron transport chain. It's the same thing. And yeah, there are lots of syllables. Once you break it down, it makes perfect sense. We'll get to that in the next chapter. What I want you to know, though, is that both of these use electron transport chains. Very important. Good? All right. So, where do we find photosynthesis? This is a pretty straightforward thing. If you look at photosynthesis, it is present most commonly in bacteria like cyanobacteria, in plants, of course, almost all plants. There are things that we have here in Polk County, like Dauber, that do not have the ability to photosynthesize, but most plants and some protists, like algae. Algae obviously does photosynthesis. Plants mostly do photosynthesis. Some bacteria do photosynthesis, but like everything in the world, there are some weird exceptions. Here we have lichen, that's fungi living with algae, and the algae does the photosynthesis. Here we have animals, coral polyps, with the algae living inside of them doing photosynthesis. Here we have the sea slug Alicia that steals the chloroplasts, and it's like, ha, I don't need to eat anymore. We already talked about that. And here we have the stupid PA fish that screw everything up, because it's a photosynthetic animal that's not stealing anything, it's not living in symbiosis. It just does photosynthesis, and we don't know why. Photosynthesizers are producers. Most ecosystems are based on photosynthesis. Yes, I know there's photosynthesis and chemosynthesis. You must know for the test that the most common one is photosynthesis. I already said that on the last slide. Chemosynthesis exists, it counts, it is a form of autotrophy, of producerism, but photosynthesis is a lot more common, and it makes not glucose G3P, and yes, that's in red, yes, you have to know it. Molecular energy carriers. The big one is ATP. This is the main energy source in the cell, you already heard that. We make ATP by taking an ADP and a phosphate. Actually, we might as well do it right now. The way this works, you take an adenosine diphosphate. It has two phosphates. They're both negatively charged. You try to add another phosphate to it. How well do you think it works? It's negatively charged. It's more negatively charged. Let's bring in more negative. They don't like that, right? So the way it works is that literally you have the spinning molecule. It is called ATPsynthase. It synthesizes ATP. The way it does it is you have ADP. And it takes a phosphate and it spins around and it smashes them together. Literally, that's what it does. The ATP synthase is powered by the movement of hydrogen ions and it spins around. Okay? It literally does that. There are other energy carrier molecules. There's ATP, there's NADPH, there's NADH. We'll talk more about these, but it's pretty easy to understand. This actually helps anabolic reactions by donating high energy electrons and hydrogens. The one we really like to talk about, though, is this, NADH. That will, anytime you cut a bond, would that be catabolic or anabolic, Zach?
Catabolic.
Exactly. And does that produce energy or use or need energy? What?
It releases it.
Yes, it releases energy. Perfectly good. Perfectly good. Excellent answer. Well, a lot of times the energy that's released is high energy electrons. We're not going to waste that. It's hard to get energy. We have a little molecule called NAD+ that floats around scavenging high energy electrons. And so it's absorbing these high energy electrons and hydrogens, and it will release them later on. What it does is take them to the electron transport chain. We have to take a little moment to talk about leaves. Leaves take in carbon dioxide. You've got to know that for the test. Taking carbon dioxide, they release oxygen. And this carbon dioxide that they're taking is used to release sugar. Well, you know how we have little spaces inside our lungs to do gas exchange? They have spaces inside their leaves to do gas exchange. And they have these pores. They're called stomata. And that's where air goes in, air goes out, kind of like your nostrils. And the difference is that they can plug these up so you don't do gas exchange when they don't want to. Well, we'll talk about that more, how they cope with dry conditions a little bit later. The photosynthesizing organelles, the chloroplast, goes in the leaves too, and that's where we do the making of the sugars. That's where we do the Calvin cycle. In photosynthesis, we got two parts. We got the light reactions and the Calvin cycle. This has what you need to know. I don't want you to call it the photo step. I want you on the test to know the real name, to call them the light reactions. I don't want you to say, oh, the synthesis step. It's the Calvin cycle. I don't want you to say, oh, it's making glucose. I want you to know it's making G3P. The light reactions take light energy and they're going to use it to make ATP and NADPH. You see that, we're making our energy, okay? And this chemical energy is what will be used later to power the Calvin cycle. So, light energy used to make ATP and NADPH, also to break water. The reason we have oxygen is that the light reactions break water apart, giving us the oxygen. Good? Good? The Calvin cycle takes the energy made by the light reaction and uses that to power picking up CO2, we call it fixing the CO2, carbon fixation, and turning it into sugars. Oh, what kind of sugar? What kind of sugar?
G3P.
Excellent! Do you remember when we first talked about chloroplasts, when we were talking about parts of cells? And I said, oh, well, for now, you just have to know that they're the part of the cell in plants, does photosynthesis. Eventually, you'll have to know the names of some of their parts. Well, now is that time. We've got our chloroplast, and I only want you to know two basic things. I want you to know these stacks of membranes here, these are thylakoids, okay? Thylakoids. And in the space around them, stroma. The thylakoids are like hydrogen storage tanks, and the space around them, that's where we're actually going to do the Calvin cycle and the making of the sugars. So the first stage of photosynthesis is the light reactions. This is where we make ATP. Got to know that. All right. Split water, make ATP. The way this works, we absorb light in chlorophyll. The electrons in the chlorophyll get excited to a high energy state, and those high energy electrons are passed through to those electron transport chains and used to pump hydrogen ions, and those hydrogen ions then spin our ATPsynthase, which makes ATP. And the ATP will then be used in the Calvin cycle to make sugar. Remember I said the thylakoid is a hydrogen storage tank? It also has the pumps to pump the hydrogen in the membrane. This is a piece of the membrane of a thylakoid. So thylakoids are the little tanks to store hydrogen inside the chloroplast. And we have the whole cell, we have the chloroplast inside, we have the thylakoid, and membrane of the thylakoid. Light comes in, and it excites an electron in this receptor. When it excites the electron to a high energy state, it's passed. It's like, it's too much energy. It's passed from this protein to this one, to this one, to this one. And it goes down, down, down in energy. Each one uses a little bit of that energy and passes it to the next one. What are these things doing when they pass the electrons around from high energy state to low energy state? They pump hydrogen from the stroma to the inside of the thylakoid. All right? They pump hydrogen in. Oh, and you remember I said that we break water during the light reactions? All right, we break water because we're putting the hydrogens inside the thylakoid space. Remember, we store hydrogen in the thylakoid space. Oh, and then we just breathe out the plant gives off the oxygen that we breathe. That's kind of nice. Because we're doing active transport, but we're not powering it by ATP. We're powering it by high energy electrons that we rip the energy off of at each step. If you look at this, the one thing I want you to notice, you go through the electron transport chain with this high energy electron, then you do it again. Why on earth would you do the one named photosystem 1 after you do the one named photosystem 2? Isn't that kind of screwed up? They did.
No.
Zach said maybe they named it wrong. What he should have said, I'm going to change it slightly, is maybe they named it wrong because they named it in the order they discovered it, because that's what happened. They named it, we had the photosystem, and somebody else discovered another, like, no, yeah, that's photosystem 1, I had photosystem 2. Then they worked out the order, like, oh, 2 comes first. Now, me at that point, trying to be logical, I would have renamed them A and B. But no, they just stuck with the original names to confuse everyone who takes biology classes for the end of time. Sorry. I want you to know that 2 happens first. That's in red. You probably knew I wanted you to know it. So we use the high energy electrons, and we use it to pump the hydrogen ions. We fill the thylakoid with hydrogen. Good? Fill the thylakoid with hydrogen.
Yeah.
We've got lots of hydrogen on the inside from two sources, from splitting water and from pumping with the electron transport chain. Good? Lots of hydrogen on the inside. I'm going to show you how we're about to talk about the movement of hydrogen ions, just like the movement of water. It powers ATP synthase. That's okay. I've been bitten. Ow, he has teeth. Ow, ow, ow.